After I talked about the 3 Mario movies a couple of years ago, I wasn't expecting to make a video on the sequel to the Illumination film. The first one was a highly anticipated event, and I had 2 older ones to compare it to for a video that I would find interesting to make. It was fun to do, and I didn't feel like I'd ever have the compulsion to do a follow-up. Then the second film was revealed to be based on Galaxy. Okay, I kinda have to now. Mario Galaxy 1 and 2 were formative games for me growing up, as you will have gathered from the extended yap sessions I've done about them in the past and am continuing to work on for later this year. So seeing them get adapted onto the big screen has an inherent level of novelty to me. With that said, I still wish they didn't jump straight here instead of building the world up by adapting some of the smaller scope stories first. It is very clearly a decision fueled by pandering to the nostalgia of the Wii kids who are now old enough to have their own spending money. So, you know, me. Either way, we're here now. So, what did I think of it? Well, I can't reuse the same second best of the year joke I did last time since I've watched several other movies released in 2026. So, 11th best film I've seen in cinemas this year, easily, not even a contest. Yeah, I didn't really get much from it. Keep in mind, I was going in with the baseline expectations of, I want to have a fun time, and I want them to do justice to the story of Galaxy and the arcs that they set up for the characters. In terms of being fun, yeah, I can't deny that there were some scenes that I had a good time with. In particular, all of the action. A problem I mentioned with the fights in the previous films was that they lacked much back and forth, usually being cases where one side stomps the other until the tables get turned and they immediately lose. Working around this with the restriction of a single clean hit getting rid of power-ups seems difficult, but this movie managed to do it better than its predecessor. From here on out, I'll be giving spoilers, so consider this your warning if you want to go in blind. The 2v2 in the climax was pretty solid. Some suspension of disbelief is needed since it opens with Mario holding off Bowser and Jr. on his own, when previously just Jr. was kicking his ass in a 3v1. But fine, whatever. I like the incorporation of the Cloud and Drill suits. Using the Cloud platforms to block Bowser's fire is much more creative than the more basic stuff the first film used. Rosalina thrashing Megaleg sells her power pretty effectively until she starts struggling with a single bullet bill. As predictable as it was, I like that the Lumas being threatened is what causes things to get turned against her. Peach and Toad fighting off Wart's henchmen was fairly enjoyable. The gravity of the casino made things much cooler to look at. My favourite fight scene though has to be Bowser Jr. taking on Mario, Luigi and Yoshi all at once. It effectively establishes Jr. as a threat since he commands a lot of the battle, and it doesn't feel entirely one-sided. He does take a couple of hits and get disarmed a few times, but manages to regain the upper hand. So it's not like the heroes are made out to be completely useless during it. They can still defend themselves. Jr.'s just really good at staying on top of things. I particularly like how Luigi's section was done, having him be much more of a klutz, which ends up working in his favour, allowing him to stumble into things that help him survive. Outside of the fights though, I can't say that I found much of the movie particularly enthralling. It's an Illumination movie, so I wasn't expecting a hundreds of beavers tier comedic riot, but I still found very little here all that funny. I think I might have chuckled a couple times unironically. I remember finding it amusing when Luigi and Yoshi teased Mario for his crush over Peach. There were a few quirky Illumination brand jokes that made me groan, but mostly this just kind of washed over me and made little impression. The animation and music are still good at least. It looks every bit as stellar as the first one did, and the score works in more Galaxy motifs, so that's an easy win in my book. Maybe not as much as I would have liked though. I only picked up on a handful of tracks used, which pales in comparison to the sheer variety from the 2023 film. Well, at least I got to hear Gusty Garden blare as Mario beat the shit out of the Odyssey Dragon, that was fun. Also, there were significantly fewer licensed music tracks. I can only recall one accompanying a montage where Yoshi's exploring Brooklyn, which I can accept in context. Nothing when they're in the quirky cartoon Mario Land, which is appreciated. It helps give the two worlds a different vibe. So, how about the second point I mentioned? How well does this do the characters and the story of Galaxy? Not really, if I'm being honest. Bowser Jr. is about the only one I consistently liked with any relation to the plot. His desire to impress his dad is super cute. I like that he's the one to bring Bowser back to his side by showing how much work he put into achieving their dream. He's formidable in a fight. Benny Safdie's performance grew on me more as the film went on. The flashback with the puppet show is adorable, and I really like how they approach him seeing how Bowser was changed by his imprisonment. They don't do the boring, "Oh wow, I can't believe how soft you've gotten. Maybe you weren't as cool as I thought you were" bullshit. Not even when Bowser actively asks him to not kill Mario and Luigi. No, Junior loves his dad so much that he stands firm in the beliefs that were taught to him as a baby and encourages Bowser to return to those ways. He's not completely off the hook. I do think it's super lame that once Mario saves him, he just completely gives up with no reaction or response or showing of any kind of change. He's just done, I guess. Also, the dragon turning on him in the first place is super strange when his paint creations have obeyed him just fine up until now, but whatever. He's still decently well done. The rest of the cast aren't. I've just praised Junior, but I really cannot get behind how Bowser is done here. They open with him clearly still resenting Mario for kicking his ass and trying to manipulate his way into being let out. As soon as he does regrow, he immediately drops any evil intentions, violently makes out with Mario, and sacrifices himself into slavery so that the brothers can go free. These feel like entirely different states of mind for him with no natural progression between them. It's not an act he's putting on either. He had no plan to free himself from the honey mines and is visibly distraught when he thinks Mario and co are dead. Then once Junior brings him back to the side of evil, he goes completely out for blood every time he encounters any of the heroes with no hint of his pseudo-redemption. He doesn't even get to speak to Luigi at all, despite the fact that they seem to get along quite well during his imprisonment. Jack Black is still doing a good job and the character has enough menace as a villain, but outside of his bond with his son, I just don't buy anything about how he's written. Yoshi was the brand new addition teased in the last film's post-credits scene, so you'd think he'd be a huge part of this movie, right? If anything, he's more an indication that they should have done a Mario World movie to establish him before leaping straight to Galaxy. Yoshi's cute in this film, there's some charm in the bond that he builds with the Mario Bros, and Donald Glover's doing a solid job, which in this context is a very funny sentence that I get to say. He also doesn't have a ton to do which impacts the plot besides landing one good hit in the final battle, which only happens as a quirky joke to end a fight that he's otherwise absent from. He has some small stuff in the montage in the first act, he saves the babies from the T-Rex which doesn't go anywhere, that's about all that comes to mind. He has this one-sided rivalry with Toad who's jealous of him, I guess, which only made me realize how little I care about Toad in these films. He declares that he and Mario are best friends in the first film, which I think is the last they ever interact off the top of my head. Then he's just kind of along for the ride without a ton to do, which extends to the sequel. Luigi is present for the whole film this time, which is appreciated. He remains one of the more entertaining characters, and Charlie Day still sounds like he's having fun, but he's also just kind of along for the ride without anything interesting of his own to do. Even Mario is given less than last time, basically just amounting to he has a crush on Peach, which gets very little focus. Gifting the parasol and kicking rocks together are cute scenes, and then that's all they get. There's another scene where Peach tries to hug him while he goes in for a firm handshake, and I could not bear the second-hand embarrassment. During this scene, Peach does not question why the people she left in charge of her kingdom are no longer on that planet. She kisses him at the end though, much less passionately than Bowser did, I might add. Make of that what you will. Speaking of Peach, there's an attempt to expand on her origin that was teased in the last film. Now she's apparently Rosalina's sister made of stardust, and was sent away as a baby to protect her from being kidnapped from people who would want to exploit the two's power. Why did Rosalina never attempt to reunite with her sister once they were both adults who were capable of defending themselves? Excellent question. Honestly, I don't mind the changes from the storybook since this is its own continuity. Same reason I didn't care too much about DK being Cranky's son instead of grandson. This is a potentially emotional connection that the movie does not capitalize on at all. She reads about it in Rosalina's library, which gives her further personal stakes to complete her mission. Okay, that's a good start. She opens up to nobody about it and doesn't get to have a full conversation with her sister. Once they reunite, they hug and purify Planet Bowser, go back to the Mushroom Kingdom to rebuild the castle, and then the credits roll. To be fair, I don't know when she would have had time to talk to Rosalina because she is barely in this movie. After her one cool action scene, she gets kidnapped and remains that way until the very end. The only other thing she does is briefly break her restraints so that her Luma can escape, which it does easily, but Rosalina stays and fights instead of escaping herself, which leads to her getting recaptured within seconds. She's barely got more of a role than J.K. Simmons' Santa did in Red One. At least she does not sleep through 80% of her screen time, a bar I did not think I would need to praise them clearing. Even Luigi got more to do in the last film, where he famously was not in it very much, by virtue of having any involvement in the final battle and a handful of character moments to himself. This disappoints me more than anything else in the film. Rosalina should have been the easiest slam dunk for them to get right. They have already made me emotionally invested in this character before with nothing more than some still images and sad music. The work is already mostly done. Her storybook in Galaxy wasn't deep in the grand scheme of things, but it hit every beat it needed to in order to work, and it was much more emotionally ambitious than Mario platformers had any precedent of being. Change up the structure all you want, but don't completely sideline the emotional core. It worked as a side thing in the game because the focus was on the interactivity of playing it. The storybook was a pleasant hidden surprise if you chose to seek it out. Movies are inherently more narrative driven. You cannot brush that aside and have everything work out fine. I'm not asking for Rosalina to be in every scene, but at least give her more screen time than Fox McCloud. Everyone I see talking about this movie says that at least Fox was fun, and yeah, he's probably in the upper end of the cast. You can't make something worse by adding Glenn Powell. His performance is solid, but I struggle to think of anything memorable Fox did besides an entertaining meeting with Mario and Peach, a cool 2D origin story that should have been its own movie, and 2 barrel roll jokes that felt incredibly pandering. Having him pilot the observatory was pretty sick though, I'll give them that. Generally, I found this movie to be a bit too reference heavy for its own good sometimes. I didn't mind it in the first film because the Easter eggs were fun to spot and usually weren't too intrusive. Here we've got cornball lines to the effect of, "In this rainbow road we call life, time to meet your maker, Mario," or "You'll face Bowser's fury." I'm paraphrasing because I don't remember the exact wording, you get the gist. Several action scenes that are fun in a vacuum feel like total filler that could have been trimmed to develop the characters a bit more. We didn't need the casino scene when Peach could have easily gotten the information from the Luma, but then we'd be missing out on several minutes of Mario 2 references. Yoshi has to save the gang from the Odyssey T-Rex because look, he's carrying the babies like in Yoshi's Island. If it was just references to other Mario stuff, then that'd be one thing. Some of them are incorporated pretty naturally, like Ukiki stealing Toad's backpack. But from Fox's prominent screen time, you would be right to assume that's not the only one. Rob has a set of cameos where he's the Zootopia sloth, except not funny. Luigi turns the tables on Bowser by summoning Mr. Game & Watch. The scene where they meet Fox also has Pikmin show up. I'm certain I saw Samus's ship in the background, and there might have been some F-Zero stuff as well. It all feels like it was done with the purpose of setting up a Smash Bros. Cinematic universe, as if Mario as a franchise doesn't have enough to sustain one on its own. At the very least, you should not be resorting to that 2 movies in. The Mario Galaxy movie really let me down, and again, I cannot stress enough that I was not after a masterpiece here. I know the kind of film I'm getting into, but when this one actively sets up more story stuff than its predecessor and actively drops the ball with it, I just can't say I like it as much. I like certain bits and pieces of it, unfortunately this doesn't extend to the whole package. You might be surprised to hear after all this complaining though, I don't fully dislike this movie either. Sure, I've been pretty negative towards a lot of elements, and I could see it worsening if I watched it again. What saves it somewhat is the experience I got to have with it. I got to see this on a trip I took down to England with 3 of my online friends, and had the absolute time of my life. Not because of the movie's own merits, but because me and the friend I was sitting next to would keep quietly pestering each other during it. The amount of times we turned and saw the other recoiling over one of the cringy lines or rushed plot beats, or nudged the other to ironically Wojak point at the screen, or whisper, "Oh my god, I get that reference," made it all worth it. The bit that will forever stick with me was when Luigi said, "I kinda liked being a baby," and I saw her instinctively retract into her chair and look away from the screen. We continued to pester her with that for the entire trip. Both of us lost our shit when it sounded like the Luma said fuck, and when it looked like Bowser bit Mario in the crotch. much. There was also a group of kids sat near us that kept shouting Yoshi's name even when he was nowhere to be seen. It pissed us off, but god was it funny in retrospect. I'm no stranger to having my opinion on something be elevated by a strong personal attachment from an experience like this. Though unlike the other films I've seen in cinemas with online friends, those being Sonic 3 and The Naked Gun, Mario Galaxy is not a movie I already loved that gets elevated higher by the memories I associate with it. It's one that gets to stay afloat in the pool of mediocrity thanks to a fun cinema visit, rather than being something I actively think negatively of. Still, it was one of the best cinema experiences I've ever had. Even if the movie wasn't very good, I value the memories I made during it far more. Before I end things off, I wanted to briefly turn my attention back to the 2023 Mario movie. In retrospect, I'm not sure how I feel about the video I made on it. Not just because I had to learn the hard way to never trust Google pronunciation guides again, but because I seemed to be really hyper-focused on the positives and gave more credit than was maybe due behind the intention of some aspects. All for a film that I liked, but didn't passionately love. I meant to give the film a rewatch to prepare for Galaxy, then ended up running out of time since I was too busy during the lead up with the editing for another video on one of the Galaxy games. I've now rewatched it with a hindsight of how its sequel turned out, and with the honeymoon phase having since worn off, I still like it actually. Not to the same extent I did previously, the issues definitely stuck out to me more. I'll rattle through those real quick just to get them out of the way. The pacing is much worse than I gave it credit for. After the first act, they barely know how to slow down for longer than 30 seconds. Like, that Unagi scene has one of the funniest jokes in the movie, but the character stuff is rushed through so damn quickly. Luigi has barely anything to do, which sucks. I don't buy him being near enough Mario's equal in the final battle when he started at a lower level of capability and didn't go through the same training. I don't mind Girl Boss Peach on paper. She's the mentor figure training someone new to the place that she's lived all her life. They don't give her many struggles of her own though. Mostly they just write her out of the main conflict scenes to give it any level of tension. And when she easily incapacitates Bowser near the end, that really undermines how threatening of a villain he is. The needle drops have only gotten worse for me over time. No Sleep Till Brooklyn is relatively innocent in the context of its use. I greatly prefer Take On Me, Holding Out for a Hero, and Mr. Blue Sky as songs in a vacuum, but could not stand the shoehorned incorporation into their scenes. On the topic of music, Peaches has still not grown on me as a song. Funny concept, middling execution that doesn't hit me as either a song or joke. It's one of the few times that Jack Black doesn't disappear into his role and stops being a character. It was way better than Lava Chicken at least. Speaking of jokes, they do not always put their best foot forward comedically. Nowhere near to the same abyss as Illumination can get at their worst. There is refreshingly not a single fart joke here, but anytime they had a character explain the punchline to what just happened, or cut to a shot desperately trying to be a reaction gif, I got really annoyed. Cranky Kong sucks, Lumali is even worse. The innocent looking character saying nihilistic shit thing is a trope that's so played out by now. There are several points where things happen completely off screen just to push the plot along. Like Bowser's scouts we never see keeping him updated on Mario's journey, or Toad somehow getting an ice flower after being captured. The star as well is a terrible MacGuffin. Why did Bowser even need it? He conquers the monkeys and the mushrooms just fine without it. Even if they did put up a fight, what difference was that extra 30 seconds of invincibility going to make? A lot more cracks have shone through 3 years later, and yet, in spite of it all, I still had a fun time with it. After Galaxy, it's refreshing to go back and see actual dynamics between some of the characters. Mario and Luigi's few scenes together get to show how much they care about one another, since Mario's concern is about dragging Luigi down with him, and Luigi's there to support him when nobody else is. Bowser tries to win Peach's affection before threatening her people to draw it out of her, and only after their deal is broken does he go for complete violent bloodlust. Donkey Kong and Mario are rivals who bicker at every opportunity, and it results in some of the movie's more entertaining jokes. These aren't deep or complex relationships at all. Other characters like Toad completely get the shaft, but having them at all is definitely a leg up over its successors. Bowser. The first film generally has a better idea of what it wants to be. Not something with a ton of emotional weight or a story any less thin than a sheet of paper, just a fun time with a bunch of Easter eggs and likeable enough characters. Those Easter eggs remained fun to spot on this rewatch, and I do still like these interpretations of the Mario cast. Mario and DK's father issues are barely fleshed out, but they function enough. Peach is still the noble and compassionate protector of her people. I don't have a problem with her being more proactive than in the earlier games since she retains her identifiable traits. Kamek has a small role, but it's so funny how Bowser just does not care for him at all, something that honestly extends to Galaxy as well. Luigi's brief screen time stings because I really like him and Charlie Day's vocal performance. The scene he shares with Bowser is maybe my favourite in the whole film. Speaking of Bowser, he's still the highlight. A very entertaining and menacing villain when he needs to be. Jack Black absolutely kills it. Although the action here is overall weaker than Galaxy, it might actually have my favourite individual scene between them. I just really love that Rainbow Road car battle for how much it has going on. Mario Kart has worked pretty seamlessly into the plot since it makes sense for them to need to take a vehicle shortcut to get back to the Mushroom Kingdom faster, and all the long takes with the moving camera are super impressive. It's also a showing of just how nice the lighting is across the whole movie. The rainbow glow pops against the dark background so well. Other highlights include Mario's dimly lit room after his dad upsets him at the start, Bowser's intense fiery orange glow engulfing the colder blues in the Penguin Kingdom, and okay, one plus I will give the Peaches song is that it does look amazing. I still wouldn't say it's an especially funny film. There are plenty of groaners and even more jokes that go in one ear and back out the same ear. But to its credit, on this second viewing I still got some chuckles and even a few laughs. Peach's unsubtle attempt to make Mario feel better after the obstacle course, most of Mario and DK's beefing, particularly the iconic "Your dad's right," and DK asking Mario not to tell anyone he saved him. And most stuff from Bowser and Luigi managed to remain funny to me, even though I've heard the lines before. Easily my favourite joke across the film has to be Bowser asking Luigi if princesses find Mario attractive, and him responding with, "They do if they have good taste." The banger jokes aren't super common, but they are there, and that counts for something. A whole lot of yapping just for me to say that, yes, I do still like the Mario movie. I can meet it on its own terms as an unambitious Easter egg fest with the loosest to focus on its story, since it's still able to provide me a fun experience as a Mario fan. Something that Galaxy has shown did not guarantee it a free pass. I fully expected it to drop even lower to the same middling depths, but what can I say? I had a good time. The old anime film from the 80s might have overtaken it as my favourite though. Even if it doesn't hit the same high points, it lacks the same large number of issues and also has Mario Ramen. That'll bring this discussion to a close then. Hope you enjoyed hearing me yap about the quirky Italian plumber films again. I've had fun doing all these Galaxy videos, though definitely want to get some variety in the new stuff that I talk about. There are new films for both Shaun the Sheep and Godzilla coming out later this year, everyone's favourite dynamic duo, so I'll probably talk about those when they drop. Until then, I got plenty other videos I'm working on to keep me occupied. Hopefully see you around for some of those. Thanks for watching.